Welcome back, everybody, to the North Central Washington MVP series brought to you by Career Connect Washington and the Apple STEM Network. I'm your host, Carrie Horning, Career Connected Learning Specialist with the NCESD 171. I like to remind everybody our goal is simple: to introduce our community partners throughout North Central Washington to one another. And a win today looks like each of you leaving with a greater understanding of the work being done throughout our region. So grab your lunch, sit back, and get ready for an extra dose of professional nourishment. Today's most valuable partner is Heidi Lim, Director of Product and Community Partnerships with 12. Welcome, and thanks for being our most valuable partner, Heidi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And my pleasure. I'm so excited about this one. So let me do a quick introduction and we'll get rolling. Heidi is passionate about our climate, her role with 12 and climate careers. I encourage you all to check out her maker content on the topic, both on LinkedIn and TikTok. I personally am so looking forward to this and learning a lot from you today, Heidi. And we've got a lot to cover. I know we were just kind of talking about that behind the scenes. So are you ready to kick this off and get going?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So before I actually get started, I need to clarify a question for myself. Can it, and even just for this interview, can clean energy and renewable energy be used interchangeably?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. All right, then we're on track. So, all right, let's do it. So 12, so exciting to have 12 in Grant County in North Central Washington. 12 is a carbon transfer company. What does that actually mean? And what sets 12's approach to clean energy apart from other companies?
Absolutely, yeah. So carbon transformation is the idea that you can actually turn carbon dioxide into new molecules that are useful. And so if we look at the way that the world has worked the past, since the Industrial Revolution, is we've used fossil fuels to do all sorts of stuff to give us, fuel and energy and to even make products. So, I mean, some people might not even know that, plastics are, one thing, but you can actually make many different chemicals from oil. And so a lot of the things in our everyday life, including like the chair I'm sitting on and the clothes that we're potentially wearing, like I know this is polyester, like those are all things made from oil. And it's a very useful way to get those carbons, basically. And so what we're saying is, oh, well, you can actually get the carbon from carbon dioxide to make all those things that make modern living possible. So you can make jet fuel out of carbon dioxide, and that's what we're doing at 12, based on fundamental scientific discoveries that our founders were making, a decade ago at Stanford. So we call it carbon transformation because we are literally transforming the carbon dioxide molecule, and that CO2, as many people know, is an important gas for us to be able to manage and reduce in the atmosphere. We don't want so much free carbon dioxide because it is sort of the primary greenhouse gas for causing climate change. And so if we can reduce those emissions, prevent them from going into the atmosphere or taking that CO2 from the air directly, that would be a great way for us to take that CO2 and then turn it into something useful. And then the added benefit is then you can prevent the use of fossil fuels for those different things. So we get kind of a dual benefit there.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be again very simple questions. So as you think about creating aviation fuel out of carbon, does the factory literally kind of inhale from outside through what would usually expel, maybe a pipe that would expel? Is it actually inhaling and bringing it in for production?
That's an awesome way to talk about, how you can collect the CO2. So yeah, we actually could connect. We don't make carbon capture systems, so we would be able to connect into a different type of technology that captures CO2, either at what we call point source capture, which is we're pulling, we could prevent CO2 from escaping from a location that usually is releasing a lot of CO2 in a concentrated manner. So that's like a landfill or ethanol plants.
Okay.
So yeah, ethanol is a major interesting source of CO2 because for us, it's biogenic. So the CO2 comes from essentially plants being processed, and then it's also highly concentrated and very pure. So that kind of CO2, biogenic CO2, is interesting for us. But there's actually this emerging technology called direct air capture, DAC for short. And that type of technology, yes, it does the inhalation of CO2 from the atmosphere directly. So we're talking about like I know that you're very familiar with farming. You could have on your farm these machines that pull, it's basically a vacuum. So yeah, inhalation is a great way to say it because it's like sucking in air and then basically filtering out the CO2 and then collecting that CO2.
Okay.
That's not like the most mature technology right now, but there are a number of companies who are working on that, and we certainly can connect to any of those. And our job is to answer the question of, okay, when that CO2 is captured, what happens next?
Okay. Oh, I love it. I knew I was going to learn a lot on this. Thank you.
Great.
That's a terrific explanation. So, okay, so you mentioned it, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. The Moses Lake facility is going to focus on aviation fuel.
Yep.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're very excited to be a new partner in Grant County, specifically Moses Lake, where we found this brownfield site that used to be an old sugar beet mill.
Mhm.
And so yeah, we're building our first commercial demonstration plant there. Currently building as we speak and making quite a lot of progress there. And the first plant, this one will be making about 50,000 gallons of jet fuel every year. So yeah, that's a lot, but if you think about how much jet fuel we need, it's like a lot more than that. So this is still, just the start. And we plan to build sort of multiples of that, like bigger plants, and put those all over the country in the future. But this is sort of the first one, and we're happy to have Washington State be the first home for that that next step in Ball's technology development.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. We're happy to have you here. I mean, honestly, sometimes when you live in a rural area, you really have to travel a lot. And so our family, every chance we get, we love to fly. We love to fly Alaska Airlines. I think I heard that maybe that's one of the first partners for 12 in this area.
Yeah, that's right. Our first sort of airline customer for this what we call a first flight will be that'll be Alaska Airlines and Microsoft, actually. So they're kind of dual partners on the first bit of fuel that we're making there.
That's exciting. Yeah, two great companies also here in Washington State. So good. All right, that's so exciting. Okay, so this technology is really going to change the landscape of not only aviation but for clean energy. So how's that going to look? What's the landscape going to the change in landscape? What's that going to look like over the next decade?
Yeah, so we are part of the clean energy, this new clean energy economy, because to make the fuel, a major input for us is renewable energy. So I will shout out that making more clean energy options and scaling clean energy availability is very important for technologies like ours that are sort of extensions of just that of solar, wind, and all those nuclear, those types of energies. We're like adjacent to them, even though we're not working directly in there. But yeah, in the next 10 years, I mean, hopefully we'll see our technology and technologies like ours really scale up and be able to take very meaningful chunks of the fossil fuel, like sort of the ways that we're using fossil fuels now, and work towards what we call a fossil-free future. And so, yeah, aviation, I think, is like 2% of global emissions, and that is substantial. It's the way a lot of people end up seeing family, a lot of ways that people get to see places in the world and connect with different cultures. And it's a very challenging problem to solve, to figure out a way to create a drop-in ready fuel for sort of planes that we use today. And so, yeah, I think what we are going to see is a lot of scale up, and we're, you know, hopefully going to be able to do that here at 12, but you'll see a lot of other things in the clean energy economy grow over the next 10 years. And there's a lot of investment in this area too. You know, 12 recently announced that we raised quite a bit of money. And so, you know, all that is helpful. I think that there was a period of time kind of a while ago, like I think in the early 2000s, where there was a sort of a boom and bust of clean energy investment, and then it kind of dried up. And now we have quite a lot of sophistication among investors who understand how to think about technologies like ours and are really invested in knowing that this new clean energy economy is really important and also really interesting. And so, yeah, we'll get to see a lot of that growth for the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Well, okay. So one more question on that, if I may, because as you're speaking, you know, my mind is racing a little bit. So you mentioned a little bit earlier that 12's been, you know, working on this, that it started, you know, in the labs at Stanford. And so that maybe this has been going on already for a decade. And now the plant is coming to Moses Lake and starting to scale up. So when we think about that, and then you think about that next decade, so is that going to go exponentially faster than, say, the last decade in terms of developing the technology and getting to the actual production plant? Once that juggernaut starts going and there's success, will that grow pretty quickly?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we can kind of walk through the steps of scientific innovation. You know, the founder story is basically, we have three founders, Kendra, Itasha, and Nicholas, and they met at Stanford when Kendra and Itasha were doing research in a lab that was looking at electrocatalysis, which is thinking about the ways that you can use metal catalysts and electricity to transform molecules. And so they were publishing studies, like I can think of one specific one in 2016, that they were able to show that you can turn carbon dioxide into 16 different molecules. And those are all very important chemicals for modern industry. And if you look at the paper, you know, they're discussing, I think it was 2012. It was 2012. Okay. So in that paper, they're saying in the discussion section that there is a massive opportunity for addressing climate change if you could kind of disrupt the fossil fuel industry by making molecules, making those same products out of CO2 instead. And so they were actually fortunate to get a fellowship which is now called Activate, but it used to be called Cyclotron Road. And the fellowship would basically pay scientists who are doing that kind of lab scale work to have 2 years to use world-class labs at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, right here in Berkeley, near the campus actually, and then use that and take 2 years with a stipend to make a first prototype. And so they did that and were very successful at reaching something that's just like the size of a postage stamp. So like our main innovation it's basically a membrane. It's like we call it a shiny black leaf, but it's like a thin, it's like a thin like square. And that square was this postage stamp size when we first became a company. I think they incorporated towards the end of that 2 years. And then we moved to our headquarters in Berkeley. But the industrial size is much bigger, each thing. And then from there, you need to build many different layers of that membrane to, reach the conversion capacity needed for this kind of industrial scale conversion, transformation. So yeah, there's just so many steps over the past 10 years, but it was really going from a lab and an idea and like something really tiny. And then
Yeah,
we didn't, even then, you know, a lot of it was scientific R&D. And now we're moving into sort of technology and scale, technologically developing it. And there's a bunch of other new, you know, um, solutions that we're coming up with to turn it into something we can put into Moses Lake, for instance.
yeah.
So
It's so exciting. Here, I'm actually in Grant County. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is so new and exciting. But really, you've got 8, 10, 12 years behind it already.
yeah,
So it's going to be very fun to watch. I'm so excited, to have you all here. So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit because we know that the work that I do is career connected learning. We're really trying to bridge that gap between our industry and our educators so that our students know not only what jobs exist in our area, but what skills are necessary for those jobs. So when we think about that, what kind of careers or skills do you think will be most in demand as the carbon transformation industry grows?
yeah. I mean, personally, my hope is that every job is a climate job in the future. And we have all sorts of skill sets that work in our company. I mean, we have like every clean tech company needs a front desk person. They need people to, they need people to like maintain the building. And,
Yeah.
we have engineers, we have chemists, we have
Mhm.
people who who didn't graduate from college. We have people who have PhDs. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I'm of the belief personally that people should follow what they think is the most like is unique to their interests and their talents.
Yeah.
But I also like if it is interesting to people, like getting um yeah, I'd say basic like at least take one class on energy systems or environment or
Mhm.
climate, like just to get a kind of a basic understanding. That's something I think everyone can do, hopefully, if they have access to those kinds of programs.
Yeah.
But even so, I mean companies like us need operators, maintenance people, we need people who are sort of like just have those different kind of like skilled labor. And that
Yeah.
is also a part of this, a part of the needs for
Yeah.
technologies like ours.
I love that you said that because that is a message that we really do try to speak to the students all the time. That listen, just because it's ag does not mean that you have to crank a wrench. That
Mm,
every single genre of work has a scope of positions and careers available in it. So I appreciate that you say that because you know, the students it's all new to us, right? Here in our area, it has
yeah.
been ag and hospitality and computer science and healthcare. But now we're getting this clean
Mm,
energy into the mix. And
hmm
we're trying to educate them, but they might not know much about it. But that doesn't mean you can't pursue it because, yeah, they still need salespeople and accounting people and admin people and HR people.
hmm
So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Um, so, I heard you say already, I hope every career kind of has a climate aspect to it moving forward, and that every student thinks about taking, a class in that sense. And we talk about that as well, even still with IT and computer science. Um, so is it, and there might not be an answer to this one off, the top of your head, but if a student sees this podcast and says, hey, that's sparking an interest for me. Can you think of a class? Is there like an entry level class that they might want to take, even if they're, say they're taking it online, maybe they're taking it at Big Bend Community College. Is there one out there that is kind of like the go-to 101?
I wish I had like a good answer for that. I mean, I don't spend enough time with like current curriculum.
Mhm.
I graduated like 10 years ago when I think this was way less of a thing. But I do know
Mhm.
that, there are environmental science classes. There
Yeah.
are, intro environmental engineering classes. Um, Energy systems, I think, is a class that might come up. So anything
Okay.
around sort of energy or clean energy, or if you see something about climate,
Yeah.
those are good classes just to get an idea.
Yeah.
Our specific technology is an electrochemical technology. So,
Okay.
we have a lot of chemistry in the mix, and understanding how energy works and electricity. That'll help with like sort of any kind of energy job.
Well, I know, after I asked that, I thought, yeah, that's a tricky question. And for sure, it wasn't anything that we kind of talked about earlier, but thinking about that, my daughter, I've mentioned before, has graduated just recently from San Diego State in environmental sciences. And it was very interesting to us as the parents to watch that, the courses that she was taking. I wasn't, registering her or anything like that. She was, of course, taking care of all of it. But one semester she's focused in on the oceans and marine biology, and one semester she's looking at native plants in the Baja, and food sustainability and food insecurity. There were so many different branches that she kind of looked into. I think, and she didn't know anything when she left, in 2020 for college. So again, for students who are watching this, you know what? Google it up, right? Put it into ChatGPT, ask the questions and see if it sparks an interest for you. But there is a plethora for sure of courses and avenues that you can take in this area. So I thank you. I appreciate that, Heidi. So, okay, I mentioned in the opening that for sure you like to educate people on our climate, and that you're seeking to solve these climate issues. So that, I made the reference to go check out your LinkedIn and your TikTok. But so if you're talking to an audience of students, educators, community members that maybe don't have a lot of experience or exposure to renewable energy, can you kind of share just a little bit about your passion with us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I grew up in Las Vegas. I think that's probably the way that it starts is, if you just care about your local environment, and
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people do in Grant County, right? You're in a place where you are very in contact with agriculture, which is, I mean, one of the most critical things that we as a species, work on to sustain ourselves, and it very much intersects with the environment because it happens in the environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Las Vegas, and it's very hot there. For those who, I mean, I think very similarly very hot out there where you are, but we're technically desert. So, and I just grew up with an awareness of scarcity because that's just we are only allowed to water our lawns a couple times a week, and everyone gets like a schedule of when they're allowed to water their lawns. And I remember like just going to Lake Mead and seeing that the fish there were like, some of them were diseased because they were like eating boat oil, and like you just grow up, and if you have any connection with the environment by going outside, being curious about even the bugs in your own yard, or if you're able to go on hikes, like that's something that I just grew up with. And so yeah, I think that played a big role for myself about why I started off as like a local environmentalist, caring um about like local needs for resources. I wanted to be a vet as a kid, like a lot of kids, and so I was really into endangered species and animals and conservation. And then as I got older, I was starting to become more aware of climate change and these global issues of the environmental change that happens if we don't address the sort of the growing number of emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere. So that's how it came for me. But I also think that a lot of people can access climate awareness just through their own personal interests about access to good jobs, access to housing, access to, having a cool place to walk, having shade in your neighborhood. So you're not just like, they call them heat islands. Literally, there are scientists who study, in a lot of urban environments, particularly, people experience much more heat on a hot day because there is a lack of investment from government, really, on giving people shade in underinvested communities. So those things intersect, and so now it is a big picture thing. Like climate is really, I think there's like there's millions of access points that we could use to connect the interest that we have and tie it back to
Yeah.
climate. And that's why I think climate change is like one of the biggest, most important things to think about. And if you're a young person, I really think we're here in a very special, unique time in history, in human history, because we have the ability to change the outcome of what the past couple hundred years have looked like. And
Yeah.
we have this window, and somehow we happen to be here during this time. And so, yeah, if you're able to participate, and we would love to have people participate in Moses Lake, you know, I highly encourage that.
Yeah. Oh, I can appreciate that conversation. Part of our journey as a family, we did some fundraising for Seattle Children's Hospital, and we were able to partner with Live Nation. And
Oh,
what
cool.
we, yeah, what we did was all around Grant County. I think we had 7 different sites. We would pick up trash. And it started for our family very young. I think our oldest daughter was maybe 5 or 6, which means our youngest was 3 years younger than that. So very, very young. And then a group of her friends joined into this guild that was a fundraising guild for Children's Hospital. And we would go out and pick up garbage, after concert weekends throughout the summer.
Mhm.
We have a lot of recreation out here, camping, fishing,
Yep.
hunting, hiking. And for as much as we all love Mother Nature, we don't always treat her well. And garbage gets left behind. The whole pack it out, I think is not maybe adhered to as much as it could be. But it was a really disgusting thing to do at times, but it was really a great teacher for all of us,
Yeah.
from the kiddos. And I have to give the kids credit. They did it from the time they were in elementary school all the way through high school, and then they all left for college. But still, it was a great insight into, hey, these are little steps.
Mhm.
So kind of with that,
Yep.
with that story, with that, example, what can the average person do either in their own home or, in their own community to make those small changes to help make the world a better place for our kiddos and our grandkids?
Yeah, I really think an easy thing we can all do is normalize talking about nature, environment, and climate change. Like, I think those are things that can actually really make a difference. Like, yeah, I feel like climate change is often a thing that people feel uncomfortable talking about, like,
Mhm.
because it is a big thing. I mean, for a while it was, there were folks who, I mean, there still are a minority of people who don't believe it's a thing, like it exists. But
Right.
in general, I think there's a bigger population of people. Um, there's a Yale Communications School study that they survey people every year, and their this year's study said that something upwards of 70+% of people that are representative of the US population believe that climate change is happening. They
Yeah.
understand it. So that's the majority of people. So there's
Yeah.
70% of people, but I don't think that 70% of people I know personally will talk about climate change even on a weekly basis, because
Right.
it is uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people don't know what they can do about it. So it feels despair. Um, it feels like helpless to talk about.
Mhm.
But I think that if we as a society work on talking about it, we don't have
Yeah.
to talk about the doom and gloom. Like, I think what we can talk about is, hey, this cool company came to my town, like
Mhm.
they're giving us good jobs, and I'm really excited to like work on a solution towards this really big thing. Like, that's
Yeah.
something to be proud of, and hopefully that will be something that everyone is literate on. Climate literacy, is something that's very important to us solving the bigger thing. And I think
Yeah.
being able to participate in it and be part of the solution is a huge way for people to feel like you can do something in it. It's not a helpless situation.
Yeah, you know what, Heidi, it's beautiful. I love that. And I love the idea of, yeah, you know what, let's just talk about it and let's make these, small steps in our own home, in our own neighborhood, in our own community that can start to,
Yeah.
to pay off and build. So I
Mhm.
think that's a beautiful place to end this. We're already at, the half hour mark, which I knew it was going to go quickly, especially today. But I am so grateful, to you and for you coming and sharing all the information. Anything that I can do to be a part of having that and encouraging that conversation, I'm all on board. We're excited to have you here for sure in North Central Washington. So thanks for coming up our way. Um, so with that, though, I will say thank you again for being our most valuable partner. This has been a thrill to have you here and super informative. I can't wait to share it out. So yeah, thank you very much for being our MVP.
All right. Thank you so much. And we're glad to be part of this community. I really appreciate it, Carrie.